Okay, so in your opinion, what is the most important element for keeping the heritage alive in Chinatown?
I think the first thing probably easiest to think about is the spirit, right? The spirit of Chinatown, which means we talk about the lives of the Chinese in those days, how they struggle, how they built Singapore, right? And how they preserve the customs. Easier said than done, because then how do we transform this to something concrete? Some of these are natural evolutions. Like if you go to Chinatown complex, amongst all the small shops, sundries, you'll find two shops selling all kinds of Chinese things about wedding. So when the Chinese want to get married, even the simple C, the logo and all this kind of thing, you go down there and you can buy. You know, some people want to have a basin, toothbrush, you know, the typical things that one should have on the wedding day. That's the place you get. So this is where I think customs and traditions will thrive. So long as it's there, many people will start getting curious about their tradition and their customs, the few important milestones of their life. The baby's month-old celebration, right, which has changed a lot. The wedding, right? The wedding used to be a source of a lot of conflicts, especially when you have a Hokkien married in Cantonese and the Cantonese say, I must have the roast pig, right? And the Hokkien say, huh? So those are interesting things that then happen. And of course, when somebody dies. So these are times when traditions and customs comes alive. In Chinatown, I think some of these are still around. Of course, the Sago Lane and the Deaf Streets is no more there. But I think some of these traditions are still there. You still can find Taoist priests. At least Taoist priests is still based somewhere in Chinatown. So I think some of this heritage, the local people, they know their sources. They know where to find them. But I think interestingly is that we don't have like a directory, you know. If you want to get married, you want a Chinese customs, who can you seek for advice? You know, you got to hearsay. Somebody say, "Hey, I introduced you so and so," and then you might be able to find. Somebody just asked me, "I want to become a Chinese matchmaker of traditional wedding," and I said, "Okay, but I only know one person that is doing it, and she must be probably 80 years old now." So I think some of this, as the younger gets to the age where they start seeking their roots, they'll be looking for this, and Chinatown might become the best so-called repository or the place where you keep all these things and they know where to find. The question for these people is, can they survive on this business? I mean, end of the day, you still got get the money to fill the stomach. Yeah.
Yes. Well, just curious, are you and your wife of the same dialect group?
No.
Oh, so
my wife is Cantonese and I'm Hokkien.
So when you married, were there those kind of like
Oh yeah. We were not so much of disagreement, but there were, of course, you know, you always send the official matchmaker to negotiate, and then of course it's usual they both sides will have the advisors. In those days, big families, you have all the aunties there, you know, and aunties say, oh no, you must have this, you must that. So then it's okay. Excuse me. So to the candidates, most important is like the xiu-chi, the roast pork, and some of the pastries that they would expect you to bring along, right? And the Hokkien has their own requirements. And then of course we come to a point and say, okay, it doesn't seem to be difficult and we can match, right? Of course, these days a lot of people want convenience. Now gone are the days when you, for the Hokkien, you were supposed to bring to sugar cane, right? On the car, and you fetch the bride back. And in these days, you know how difficult to get sugar cane? There is a hole. Right? But some of this has got symbolic meaning. For instance, a roast pig. What is a roast pig? Now, when the bridegroom brings the bride back to the bride's home, like normally the poor best man will carry the oily roast pig, and they'll get the whole roast pig. But the bride's family will then chop the roast pig into 3 parts and return the head and the tail back to the bridegroom's family. Why? There's a beginning, there's an ending. So there's a lot of symbolic things which most of us nowadays don't pay attention to. To us, it's very unnecessary, you know, additional work to carry. You know, why just give an ang pao? So a lot of cases nowadays, actually, they have red packets and say, okay, this is for the roast pig, you know. But I have seen cases when I was involved taking photographs for them at those days. Come along, old lady say, "Pinto taka, no, you must give a real pig, don't give ang pao." And that's where the small source of conflict comes. And that's where I think the professional matchmaker is it's very important. We must make sure that all parties
I
understand.
see.
Normally you cannot, you will not be fully prepared because there's always aunties who never appears and suddenly appears the last one.
Do you know a lot of old residents in the area?
Not really. Most of the old residents that I know are no longer around here. Some are already gone. But through friends, I get to know some people who know somebody who who used to stay here. So sometimes I would ask them for information. I say, can I interview your auntie or your mother, how life is, just to share it in my blog. And sometimes it brings responses and say, hey, you know, my grandfather was also involved in one of these association here. Hey, that's another source. I have this German friend who's a lawyer. He met a Singaporean and he said, hey, my father-in-law used to open a joystick shop in Chinatown. I said, okay, I must talk to him. But that's more like being a kepo, just put something for my blog.
I see. So how regularly do you update your blog?
As and when something comes along and say, hey, this is interesting to share. You know? I don't put it into like a fixed routine that, hey, every week I must get something out. I mean, some bloggers almost put one every day out. You know? But to me, it's more like a journal for myself, and I share. So as and when I get something interesting, I will blog about it and I'll just post it out. I think the Chinese temple is also like a center of cultural activities, and this is where it also kind of preserves the Chinese culture. So whenever there's a temple event, right, it's traditional, customary maybe, that you always should have, for instance, a performance. In those days, you're talking about puppet shows, marionettes, or operas, you know, and not so much as these days where you have Gertai, but that's modernization. I suppose in each era you have something to attract the crowd. In nowadays, there's no TV. We're too poor to go to cinemas. So when there's an event in a temple nearby, all the kids would be carrying stools to line up, you know, put in front of a stage down there and wait. And what do you see? Opera. But in those days, for instance, I would go with my grandma. My grandma listens, she understands what's singing the Hokkien, and then she'll try to interpret in simple Hokkien to me, you know. Over time it's difficult because for us, work, studies, everything changed. We don't really go and learn. So when my daughter was very young, she loves opera, right? Because of the colors, because of the singing. And then she asked, what is it? I don't know. So that's also kind of start getting me, hey, you know, now is the time for us to share what we know to our children, like what our grandparents have shared with us, but we no longer have the knowledge. So I think this is very important for us to try to document what's happening in the temple. So that was one of the reasons why I got interested. Actually, my interest started with Taoism. What is Taoism about? Most of us don't understand what it's about. What is our temple all about? None of us understand. So from a historical perspective, from an anthropological perspective, right, I'm no academic, but I feel that these are areas that I want to know more. So by chance meeting with this professor from Canada, Jean Ibarnabi, it's interesting. I thought she was just one of those Angmo tourists visiting a temple. So I was in the temple with my mother. I said, hey, come, I show you. And they also have medium in trance. And later when she passed me, I said, oh, she knows more about the temple than I do. Right? She has written 2 books on Chinese temples in Penang, and also has done a lot of research in Singapore as well. So that got me started to say, there might be people like me who's crazy enough to want to know more. So I started again like an email list, like instead of blogger, I have an email list. So over time, I found that there are a lot of like-minded people who are interested. Most of us know maybe like 5%, but when we combine, we get to know more. So right now in my list, I have professors from like Canada, Hong Kong, even from UK. Whenever they come to Singapore, like Jean Ibarnabi, they send me email, hey, so is coming, well, let's see some temples. Sure. And of course, I'll bring them there, not knowing who they are, other than say somebody's coming, you know. And somebody will come say, hey, this is the most famous professor for anthropology on Chinese temples. Say, oh, so he knows more than me, what I'm telling him about. So I only can tell the local situations, the local practice. Like recently, there's one visiting professor who did, I think you read in the newspaper about GIS and temples like this. Yeah, he has done 20 years of research on the Henghua temples in China. So it's interesting. So when these people join our list, Most of the time I always tell them, I learn from you, not you learn from me. Right? But being Singaporean, living in Singapore, I will be able to show you some parts of Singapore and some temples that the casual visitor will not be able to find. But having said that, we also try to encourage people to be more curious about their heritage. Like if you talk about Tian Hao King, right? Most people now may not know about Tian Hao King other than it's a tourist spot. Right? Typically, you go down there, you're going to find 80% non-Singaporeans. But now, thanks to the hard work put in by Tian Hao King and the Hokkien Hui Kwan, there's a lot of activities now. So in major events, you find a lot of Singaporeans, the grandmas, who try to bring the children, the grandchildren back. And hopefully it can continue the next 100 years because it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest temple. And that's one of the best preserved temples. The other one, of course, is Hong San Si in Muhammad Sultan. There's just got, I think, mentioned by UNESCO.